Only place I can sit on a pedestal. There's no other place in my life where I get the pedestal sitting. Usually it's, down on the pecking order a bit. Okay, well, welcome to Soul Forum today. Whether you're online today or with us in person, it's delightful to have you here. I know it's a holiday, so it takes a little bit of extra effort to rouse yourself in the morning and come out. So I'm delightful that you made it work. But it also takes effort on my part too. The holiday parties, I think I can disclose this. As you get older, the holiday parties that you go to are harder to recover from than they used to be. I think I took all day yesterday to recover from a holiday party the night before. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's not good. I should be more resilient. I'm my own worst enemy at those things, though. So today I wanted to pick up on this notion of story and why stories matter. But before I do that, I'm going to turn off the. Can you do that? Do you know how to turn off the heat?
Sure. I think it's okay.
Is it okay? All right. All right. If you can hear me, then it's all right. I want to. What is that? Oh, is that you, Cynthia? Okay. No, because there's so much tech playing around, I never know what's going on. I want to start taking us to a meadow at Point Reyes Station. So we're going to start in a meadow at Point Reyes Station. Explore the insights from this woman called Reclaiming Wild Soul, and then I want to move into an idea of maybe replacing your notion of metaphysics, your metaphysical world, the way in which you imagine the greater world, with a meta story. How do you allow your own story to become kind of the grander meadow on which you journey in your own sense of your soul's construction? Because I think it's one of the things that we have explored here is that there's so many diverse ways to do it. We're all responsible to kind of build a robust or solid sense of what our soul is or our spirit is, both individually and then connected to something maybe grander, and we probably construct both of those, right? So, but what is the meadow, the open meadow on which we do that? So let me start with this meadow on Point Reyes Station. This is based on an experience of this woman who is picking up on Thomas Berry's work, trying to link the nature or character of your own soul's journey to the natural world as one option, right? To think in terms of how do I allow my relationship with the natural world and my presence within the natural world to birth my own sense of soul. And in a sense, for Thomas Berry, that was the frontier that we needed to explore as we've created this culture that separates us from nature. And we know that so well, right? So how do we allow nature's voice back into our own inner stirrings? And this is how she frames it by visiting Point Reyes Station. And then after I read this piece, I'll just ring the bell and let it sink in a little bit, and then I'll kind of take us through some of the themes for today and then start a discussion together. I drive out to Point Reyes National Seashore, and I sit on a fallen log in a large meadow. The sky is hung with dark hammocked clouds, the air swimming with the salty fragrance of the ocean. A riot of pink lilies sings out from the golden grasses. A fir tree, it grows beside me, extravagant in its gestures, with so much space to fill. This is one of my favorite places in the world. I feel completely at home here and never alone. So it's the perfect spot for me to contemplate those fears that can cause me to kind of shut down emotionally or even set myself apart. I take a deep breath, aware that this is a wide, open meadow. The meadow. It's that open space without walls or fences. Here, life is on a grand scale. miles apart from the lofty schemes of economics and world events that dominate our existence, in the meadow we stand on common ground, in a place of togetherness, where the common good of the entire meadow outranks the rights of a few. And in this state of communion, we come to see that we are in touch with each other. We are in touch with the meadow itself. We need each other and are a part of each other. It is in this moment that we can experience the sacred, not in isolation, but in connection. In connection to an idea, a person, or even a place like a meadow. And it's within this community that we thrive and we flourish. It's in this meadow, this open community, that we thrive and we flourish. Isn't that a great, it's just a great, I think, invitation for today. And hopefully it's a reflection of the little community that we have here, right? This little meadow community. I thought John could have probably written this entire paragraph.
It's so good.
Yeah, I heard him chuckling and smiling along the way, knowing that it resonates with who he is clearly. But I think what I wanted to kind of explore, and this happened with us with Soulform Podcast, and we've done this over and over again with each of the people that we've interviewed, and that is that while I sit down with them and try to kind of glean the wisdom they bring to their own soul's journey, whatever that looks like for them, April then follows up with a talk of, tell me your story, right? I want to hear the story, like the milestones, the moments, the experiences that got you to this place where you now have this, what would you call it, like, I don't want to say constructed, that sounds too rigid, this, the meadowlands that you've decided to journey on. How did you arrive to get to that place? And it hit me that it's probably a great strategy when we talk about the diversity of ways in which we all kind of present soul and the way in which we're trying to honor that together, that linking our sense of our perspective of soul to our own unique story and the kind of constructed collective story that we imagine is just an important thing to kind of hold on to and claim as our own, and then to share with other people so that we can all learn from the wisdom that each of us brings to the journey. And I just love that concept. It feels like that's what we're trying to work with here. And it's different than living out from a constructed story that maybe took place thousands and thousands of years ago in some other religious system as it birthed itself in a different time and place and context, and then maybe gets immortalized and carried forward, and it's a misfit for the experience we're having today. That's where I think the challenge is. But it's much richer to just say, look, what are the experiences that are welling up in the human community today that give expression to our deepest sense of selves, our deepest notion of what our soul could be. And that feels like the moment is ripe for that. And then if you could take it even further with Thomas Berry and say, and to reclaim a connection to the stuff that really feels like it matters, like the earth, the biosphere and the natural world that we've so often disregarded in our sense of how we construct our soul. So that's why I think it's so, it has potential for us today to help construct a way forward, like John was talking about last week, right? How do you project a future that's grounded on that and not just grounded on some other abstract notion of what that future might be that you inherit? So a couple of examples that kind of got me to this. The one was, of course, the Soul Forum podcast. You get to hear the stories. The one that's coming up is the one with Brian, the artist. What's wild about that story is Brian has achieved such kind of passion for how he lives his life now. But when you hear the story of how he gets there, you're like, how did that all come together? I mean, it's not like it's not like one step builds on the other. You could just hear him wandering back and forth, not being able to figure things out, hitting walls, questioning himself, rediscovering himself, and over time emerges this young man who has this capacity to create this powerful, or to be an artist is maybe a better way to frame it, right? So that story alone is a reminder that each of our stories is the birthing ground for what we're doing. Do you want to comment? You grab the mic, because I've got this beautiful... Can you hand her the mic? Oh, very well done.
So intense.
Speak right into the mic.
Just now, I forgot my comment. Kidding.
Sorry, technically.
No.
do that
So
too.
it just
Yeah,
it
it's
is,
on.
yeah. So it's just about commitment. Like he found his commitment, and then from there, everything.
Oh, it more
blossomed and
fell into
flowered.
place once he found that. Yeah. Well, and I'm assuming we're all sort of on that journey, right? I still wonder whether my personal life, the way I live it every day, is actually tethered to my deepest sense of who I am, right? Or am I just like bouncing around to all sorts of things all the time, and every once in a while I stumble into a moment where I'm like, yeah, that's me living fully. I know for Jen, you do that journaling every night. I feel like that's like a super great tether to do that. So I know everybody's got practices for how to do that. But that was for him something. John, you were going to share something?
Well, what I hear you saying is, how do we find the meadow
Yeah.
day to day? It's there.
Yeah. Right. What's your way of, and do you even have a time of the day when you decide it's time to do some meadow, to abide in the meadow, right? We talked about that a couple weeks ago. Or is the meadow so ubiquitous that you can see it in every moment, like the way you do at the checkout counter, right? With the person, you say, "Tell me your story." That's what you're asking the checkout person. I want to know your story too.
That's my sense, that the meadow is available in our every interaction.
Yeah.
It's up to us as to whether we can turn that piece of reality into a meadow space.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're talking about.
Whether we're connected to a tree or a plant, or the checkout person, another human.
Yeah.
So my sense is that every human interaction is a meadowland waiting.
Beautiful. Yeah, every human interaction, a meadowland waiting. And that's why I call this, rather than thinking about metaphysics, pushing beyond the physical world. Some metaphysics is sort of thinking abstractly about the way in which the physical universe works. If you think meta story, then every story can become that deep, like it's more than just the story, right? It's more than just the physics, is what metaphysics means. There's something there, and can you land there in that space and be present for that space? Even this space right now, right, can be meta story. It's not just me talking. There's something else. What else is going on in our collective meadow as we talk together? So a couple of things that helped me stumble into this week. About 50 years ago, there was an article. Well, there was just an article in the New York Times about 50 years ago. There were riots happening in New York City as GLBTQ people were starting to realize that they had to advocate for their own rights for existence, right? They had to stand up for who they were. And it's been 50 years now, and finally, Biden signs into law, this last week or something, the Same-Sex Marriage Act, right? That becomes now everybody has to recognize same-sex marriage in the United States. Huge thing that I didn't really know that would happen in my lifetime, right? And yet this has been a struggle that's been going on for so long. So the woman is thinking, how did this happen that the American public finally came to a place where they're like, yes, this is what we want for the whole country. How did we get here? Because it was so divisive for so long. And as she traced back the sort of the trajectory of that movement, I don't know if you read the article. At the end, she said, people who were gay, lesbian, transgender, on the spectrum of sexual orientation or gender identity, wherever they happen to be, it was when they found they had soul enough, and she used that word, they had soul enough to tell the world who they were. And as they began to tell their story, the world began to wake up that, they are part of our human family, right? It became something that we could open up to. The meadow opened as they shared their story. And the same thing happened to me. I was I wasn't resistant to it, but there were parts of that experience that I could tell I had created barriers around, and I was a little bit nervous about. And just meeting people and hearing their stories started to drop those barriers, right? The walls came down. They were truly human beings, right? And you recognize them as such. I'm like, what am I thinking? But the story got me there, right? Their story mattered. So that idea of that, and obviously April will tell you this, that your story matters, but to think in terms of your story as like your metaphysics, your meta story, I think helps us to see that whatever's happening in my particular life, Lori's life, your life, every life, is a story that's worth experiencing as meadowland, as the open territory in which you kind of construct your deepest sense of self. And that's a good thing. It's not a selfish thing. It's not an irresponsible thing. It is the thing you should be doing. And then you do it in the community of the meadow as well, right? You don't do it alone. And those two things together, I think, make this work. The second story I stumbled into this year is Kwanzaa is celebrated. Kwanzaa is a new religious tradition, if you will. It started in 1966. Remember 1966? Oh my gosh, I do a little bit. I always link years to the key songs that I loved in those years. In '66, I don't know what my key song was, but Kwanzaa's birth in 1966, right? And you know the little bit of the story of Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa is the African American experience. They're more and more realizing that they've had to adopt a culture and a religion and an economic system, and have been forced into neighborhoods that have distanced them from their own heritage. They've had to adopt or adapt to the land in which they find themselves. And more they felt like that was destructive to they were losing connection to their story. And so Kwanzaa is a celebration that helps that community reconnect to the roots of their own African story, whatever an African nation they were part of. And they, of course, use the 7 candles, 7 values that come out of those cultures, the foods, the clothing. They're trying to do exactly what we're talking about here, right? Tether the kind of the highest days of the year to this experience of their own legacy story that goes back in time, right? That wisdom, I'm almost positive wisdom can't be constructed in one lifespan. It takes generations, right, to create wisdom. And so tethering yourself to these kind of generational stories allow for that kind of rich sense of a heritage or a perspective that I think they celebrate at Kwanzaa. And I don't know a lot of people who celebrate Kwanzaa personally. I don't know if you do, but I think that's, clearly something that they're doing that mirrors this sort of thing that we're doing as well, right? We're doing a kind of a Kwanzaa experience in our own small way of saying, what is my story and how can I express it and experience it in a way that helps me create a sense of my own soul. And then the last one is winter solstice is coming up. Yay for winter, Carla. Winter. In fact, I just saw you bought your free tickets online the other day, so I get to see everybody buying tickets, so thank you for getting your tickets. Why winter solstice, right? Well, and all these holidays, I think is super unique, right? All these big major holidays, Christmas, Kwanzaa, is it Hanukkah? Yeah, the Jewish Hanukkah, where we celebrate the light. They all happen this time of year because the big narrative is Earth narrative, particularly in our little neck of the woods, right, where the days get darker and darker and darker and darker to the point where in this quiet space you long for a breakthrough of a movement back into life again, right? You're gonna want that, and that on the darkest of night the sun pauses, solstice, right? The sun pauses and then commits to returning us back to summertime. Year after year after year after year after year after year, as long as it's been going on. And we live inside of that pattern. I mean, our lives are that pattern. We don't live except for the way Earth, Moon, and Sun dance together. That's us, right? So solstice is just a chance to tell our collective story again, right? The story that is a big meadow story that maybe helps people reimagine or reconnect to a narrative that can help bring them some meaning in life. So we do that at solstice too. I mean, that's the whole point of winter solstice. It's not just like, I'm freezing, I can't wait for it to warm up. I mean, it's not, that's true, but that's like a thin slice of it, right? I'm like, please, sun, return. And it does every year, right? It's just like this amazing gift to us. So those three like examples in my mind are just reminders of why it's just so critical for us to pay attention to the both our individual story, the meadow on which it is formed, and then the collective conversation that helps us kind of understand, interpret, realize, awaken, embrace our sense of what our story is, and then trusting that since the whole thing's driven by the very movement of the cosmos, you know, it's like a gift to you. I mean, you're like perpetuating the gift of life itself. No better, hopefully, yeah, there's no better feeling in the world than that. That's just this kind of sense of grace that we all experience, I think. So today, what I wanted to do is to kind of have us share out a little bit of our own stories, and that I got some cards that I'll pass around and give you a few minutes to do this while we kind of pause the feed. But I wanted you to think about, if you think about your own life story, are there some like bullet points along the way? And we've done this before, but now in the context of this sort of meadow experience, sort of tracing back, and were there a couple of key stepping stones for you that you think are still manifesting as your own deepest expression of self? Right? What are those things that are part of your story that are you're still building on today? And that they're not just like the way you live, they're actually more the who you are. You know, they're shaping your existence. And if there's a way for you to kind of claim the meta of your story, I think, and it would be fun maybe in the new year even to kind of workshop this a little bit, but the meta of your story, to feel like you understand at least the trajectory of it, gets you a sense of what's the future you're creating with your story. What's emerging in the arc of your own journey, and then to be able to share it collectively, and then also to link it to your sense of the greater story. Let me give you a little example of this, which I was shamed by years ago, and so I think it's a decent one. Was I was talking to a psychologist once who was kind of being critical about an idea of God that is constructed for you. And he said, you know, most people's idea of God is really a manifestation of the relationship they have with one of their parents. And then they project it onto this divine being. And I thought, no, oh yeah, I am doing that. I have attributed to God many of the attributes of my relationship to my parents. And because your child parent thing, right? And then you project that on, and I realized, oh, I have been doing that for a heck of a long time, right? My God feels mostly like my parents from heaven guiding me, and I'm like, what am I doing? So it's not a bad thing, it's just recognizing it, that we often ascribe the meta to the narrative without even knowing it, right? I let God, in a sense, be my parents. Or I elevated my relationship to them to my sense of who the divine was. So, anyway, hopefully I'm not doing that anymore, but probably a little bit, right? Because that's a primary relationship for me and for many of us, and that can sometimes be a negative thing, right? If it was not a great experience, you might be projecting out the way the universe works in that way. I don't know. I think it's just something to tend to, and that's the beauty of this challenge, is to know that we're doing that and to be attentive and mindful of the way in which we do it. All right, so let me just read again this little visit to the meadow, and then we'll invite you to do some exploring of for yourself. Oh, hold on, I'm on the wrong page, Michael. What? Let me just finish up, because you heard the story already. So this woman's out at Point Reyes. What's interesting to me is that this book called Reclaiming the Wild Soul, she visits the meadow now so that it can partner with her in helping her lower the walls of division that she keeps creating in her own life out of fear or anxiety or control, and knowing that a meadow has no walls, right? It's just this open collaboration in which everybody can function. So in order for her, when she's feeling like she's building too many walls around herself or getting too closed in, she goes to the Church of Meadow and sits there and then links her story to Meadow's story to see if it can help her kind of move into a different manifestation of her sense of self. So, she's at the meadow, and here's what she says. So I take a deep breath, aware that in this wide open meadow I have no defenses. Some mountain lion could spy on me from far off. Rain could drench me in an instant. Open spaces make me vulnerable. The open spaces inside us also make us vulnerable. An open society is a vulnerable society. Those who would destroy it have easy access. But a closed society is a suffocating one, and it can destroy itself from within. So staying open is a challenge. It takes courage to fling open the doors of your heart and to welcome whatever comes. Rilke writes, "Let no place in me hold itself closed, for where I am closed, I am false." What will it take to open our hearts to each other and to our planet, to become large and free enough within ourselves to realize that we are on this amazing earth journey together? Common purpose in the midst of a planet that evolves each and every day. Common purpose with every living thing. That draws us together on the meadow. All right, well, some beautiful thoughts from Mary Reynolds Thompson, clearly. So I'm going to pause the feed. For those of you at home, you can do this project as well. Maybe get a card out and just kind of spend a minute or two kind of thinking about 2 or 3 highlights of your own life that you think are sort of the meadow ground that are helping you construct your sense of soul. And then I'll play some music here as you all do that, and then we'll kind of share some of what came up for you. All right? All right, let me turn on some music, grab a cup of coffee. Laura, do you mind getting that? There's cards and pens in the entryway, and we'll get those handed out as well. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Oh, my achy hips.
There's two there.
Thank you.
Sure. With your fingers work.
You're the best.